Aloha and welcome. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about more operator overloading, and we're going to be talking about classes as numeric types. So we can overload not just the operators that we looked at in the last lesson, which was the greater than, less than, not equal to, things like that. We can also overload our operators like plus, minus, multiplication, division. So let me go ahead and pull up our VS Code here. Hold on just a second. So here we go. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with an example here. So let's have our person class from before. We're going to do class person, and we're going to have our initialize constructor with self here, and we're going to just set we're going to say self.name equals we forgot to pass in name again, so we're going to put name right here. So we're going to have that, and let's also do age. So we're going to go down here and say self.age equals age. So that's all we're going to do. Now we're going to go down here. We're going to do a print of dir on person and just see what kind of operators we have here. We've seen this before, but you look in here, we have greater than, not equal to, and things like that. But notice we don't have our addition, subtraction, and things like that. So there are a number of things that we can add in here, and I will go ahead and post that up here. Let's just put that like this. Oops, that's not what we want. So we can define all of these different type of operations. We can do addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, floor division, all these different things we can actually define in here, and that will tell us what to do when we have our class as the left-hand operand. So if we have something out there that looks like, well, first of all, let's say John equals person of, well, sending in John and age of 28. If we do something like this, and let's say we want to do something where we're, and it doesn't make sense to do it with people, but let's say we're going to, oh, hold on, let's add a Bob to Bob equals person, and his name is Bob, and his age is 77. And then we want to have something like add John to Bob. Doesn't make any sense really when you think about it, but let's just say we're going to do a John plus Bob. Well, if we want to define what this means, whenever we have the left-hand operand as one of our types, we're going to have to define what it means to do. Let's say it's add. We're going to have to take add over here. We're going to have to go in and define it. So let's go ahead and define what it means to add. So we're going to define this to mean that we're going to take our own age and we're going to set it equal to that of the other one. So we're going to add the two ages together. It sounds silly. It is silly, but let's just define it this way. So if I do a John plus Bob, that should add Bob's age to mine. So I should be 105 after that. So let's see how that works. So we're going to go ahead and say that, yeah, let's just print Bob and John plus Bob and see what happens here. And it says none, and that's right, because when we're calling it, it doesn't return anything. But now if we were to print John.age, let's see what happens. Boom, 105, as I suspected. So this returns nothing because, again, in our thing here, we didn't return anything. We could have it return something. We can tell it to return self.age, and that will kind of act a little bit nicer, so we don't have to go down here and do that. But notice that we're creating side effects in a way here. When we're adding these two together, we're not storing it anything. All this is going to mean is that the one on the left-hand side is going to get the age from the right-hand operand added to it. So we get this. So print Bob and John and Bob's going to return nothing. Actually, we can just do this right here and not assign it to anything, which looks very bizarre and very un-Python-esque, but you can do that. You can define it to add the two ages together. So we can overload all of our operators like this. We can do this for or, we can do it for subtraction, multiplication, whatever you want to do. We can do the overload like this. So if you're trying to do it on things like in this case, we know that they're both the same type, but what happens if we try to add John, 1 to John? Well, this is going to give us an error because 1 is not of the same type, which is person. So we're going to end up with an error here. It's going to say int object has no attribute age, because it's going to take the thing on the right and it's going to go up there and try to get its age property, and it doesn't have one. So we need to do something, for testing that. And there's a way to do that, and it's called isinstance. So we can use isinstance like the following. We can do a check before we try to do the add, and we can say if isinstance, and isinstance is a built-in, it's a built-in function, and you can see the definition of it here popping up. So we're going to say isinstance. And we're going to say other. If other is an instance of person, if it's an instance of person, then we're going to do these two things. And else, we're going to do something that we're not really going to define just yet, but raise is how we flag errors. And we're going to use a not implemented error to let the person know that there's an error here. So what happens now is when you try to run that, instead of dying that way, you're going to die differently. You're going to have it die and it's going to say not implemented error. So at least that way you'll know kind of what's going on there. Or, you did, perhaps, you could come over here and say, instead you could do a print of an error here, and you can say print, we have not defined that functionality yet. And by doing that, you're kindly letting them know without crashing the program. You can have it say, we have not defined that functionality yet. And that's using isinstance. So isinstance is a nice handy thing to use to check to see what that other operand's class is, so that you don't end up trying to do something that's illegal and blowing up. So so go ahead and use that isinstance where it's appropriate, and that way you can make sure that when you're doing operations, but you can check to make sure that they're of the same type, so you don't blow up like that. So again, remember, this is really not good form to do something like that, but yeah. But this is one way we can, we can define an add. When you define an add between things, it'll add the age from this one to the age of that one. There's probably better ways to do it. And we could do something like, let's do one other, let's define multiplication here. So multiplication, if you see, is just like this. So we can go and define multiplication over here. So let's say that we want to define multiplication as being, let's just have it concatenate their names together. So if we're going to multiply it, we're going to have it do that. So we can say, let's do no checking on it. Let's just say self dot name equals self, or we can, we can just do a plus equals in this sense, in this one, other dot name. I just thought of something that's not going to give us a nice little pretty space between the two, but let's go ahead and add. Yeah, this is really going to get ugly. Let's just make it self. And this is a really ugly way of doing it, so yeah, don't take any cues from me on this one. We're just going to have it do this. We're going we're going to have it concatenate the two names together. So if we did something like John plus Bob, we would end up getting the two concatenated. So if we were to John plus Bob, and then we printed out John.name after that, we're gonna, let's see, let's run that, and oops, hold on. We actually didn't concatenate that. Why did we not concatenate? Let's look back up there. Oh, because I'm doing a plus of it, and I meant to do a multiply, right? So when I do that, I go back here, I'm going to get John Bob, which is kind of what we expected from here. So that is one way that we can overload it's one way that we can overload our operands, our operators. So this is convenient. Hold on just a second. I want to also look at one more. Let's see. Let's do a subtract. So we're going to do subtract here, just to kind of give you another example. So we're going to say and these are really bad definitions. These are really bad definitions. I do apologize for that. But if we're going to do something, we're going to say self.age minus equals other.age, and that will give us, that will assign that for us. One thing that we can do is instead of actually, we don't have to assign it. We can actually do something like just return. So we can do a return of self.age minus the other age. And that way we don't set it, which would be a side effect. That's actually a better way of doing it. So let's define it that way. So instead, we're going to do a minus here, and let's see what happens then. So we want to look at age after that. So when we do John minus Bob, that's going to return something, and we're not actually doing anything with that result. So when we look at John.age again, John should have the same age, which is 28. So we do that, and it does. But if we go over here and we say print John minus Bob, this is the better way of doing it. It's going to be negative 49, because my age 28 minus 77 gives us 49. So this is really the better way of using it, because up here we're setting the like we were setting the name, we're setting it, and that is setting up a side effect, which makes something like this. Instead of returning something, it's actually setting the age or whatever of John here, or the name of John, or actually for this it was age. But you know, setting things, it's a bad practice to have a side effect of doing something like that. So it's probably best if you were to just access the age attribute and return the difference of the two. So when you do a print of John minus Bob, you're just giving the age difference and not actually setting John's age accordingly. So you could do something like you could set, if you wanted to, you could set John.age equals John minus Bob. Something like that would be fine. And then you could do a print of John.age. And then that would be the negative 49 again. So that would be one way you could use it and access it. But in general, yeah, you don't want to be doing what I did in the first couple of examples, which is setting up a side effect. You don't really want to, and when I say a side effect, you're doing an operation, and that operation is modifying one of the two. So that's not really a good way of using it. You'll want to use it in the sense that it'll return the value for the operation, but it won't actually modify your object. So use it this way instead. So that is pretty much the subject here. You can go into trying any of these operators that you can override. I mean, there's float, there's int, absolute, there's all these different ways you can do it, and whatever you can dream up in terms of a class, you can define these operations on them. But note that those operations don't exist by default when you create your class. You can add them to it. Before, when we were doing greater than, less than, those were actually in here as dunder statements or dunder methods, but we don't have those as automatic dunder methods, but we can add those to it. So you can add all of them, none of them, or whatever. And when you're doing this, it's best to use isinstance to make sure that the other object there is an actual instance of the right type, so that your operations that you're going to do make sense. Otherwise, you can raise an error. And we'll be talking about raising exception errors and things like that in the future, but don't worry about that for now. But do as I did in the last example and not the first two, because in the first two up here, not in it, but with add, it's best not to create side effects like that. It's best if you're going to do an add or something, just return the value itself instead of setting it up here. Just return the, like instead of self.age plus equals other.age, just do a return of self.age plus other.age. That's the better way of actually doing it. So anyhow, hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions, if I confused you by showing you how not to do it and then showing you how to do it properly, feel free to send me an email or get in touch with me, and we can set up a Zoom chat so I can go over this in detail. But otherwise, I will see you in the next and final section of this lesson.